Hi, Kim. Look at you. You're all blurred today.
Yes, there were some technological issues on my end this morning, living on the road. So if you hear what would you like in your latte, I'm outside of a Starbucks in a small town and I had to urgently reposition to get a signal. So it's one of those days, Aim, where I'm like, I would rather be sitting on your deck right now. I
You
would
know,
rather
girl,
be
one, it's raining, so you don't want to be sitting out there. And also you rallied, so we're good. We're
we're
good.
good. And actually we're talking today about something that I literally had never heard of, and I'm going to tell our guest when we bring her in, Kesley Denney, is I'm from a farming family originally, and this is a show about mental health. So we're going to connect that for the audience, but this is something that I didn't even know was such a problem, a mental health crisis with farmers. So,
Mhm.
like, I'm fascinated by this topic today.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I found Kesley in the sphere of the internet, and it just one of
Internet.
those things that I was just really interested she was talking about, and I thought it would be awesome to come on and discuss with us.
Yeah.
And talk the shit out of shit. So
I'll just say though before we bring her in, I always think like whenever you say things like that, like use that the internet, I always think of my Aunt Sue who got me a Verizon pack, this story. And then when I showed up because she knows I work when I'm at her farm,
yeah,
is that she said, I bought you the internet. I'm like, wow, the whole internet. That's
all of it.
all of it. So she
All
bought me the internet so that I can work at the farm. And she is a soybean. And then she told me yesterday they're doing winter wheat, which she's very excited about, but she knows nothing about it. And then she sponsored a horse. So
So
off we go. We're
not to be
talking,
confused with winter weed, which is a whole other.
and I don't think Aunt Sue, well, she does have glaucoma, so
I
she
feel
could
like I
she
feel
could
like I can
be.
get antsy behind that.
Yeah, I think you probably could. She gave up white wine, so she's probably looking for a substitute.
Tell her to call me.
Let's meet our new friend.
All right, let's bring her in. Mhm.
Hello, Kesley.
Hi.
Are you in Tennessee?
I'm physically located in Alabama, but my practice is in Tennessee.
I just came through there on my travels. Gorgeous. Unbelievable place. I had to go to Tennessee because I had to go to Nashville, obviously. But I was so enamored with the countryside, and we're actually going to be talking a little bit about the countryside. And then I drove through Alabama, Mississippi. I went to 20 states on a 6 month kind of. It's a long story, but anyway, I've been around. But yeah,
Well,
you're oh, my dog's going to keep popping out of this like background, but there's Buddy. As we talk about animals, he wouldn't know what to do on a farm, I'm most certain. But um, I was fascinated when Amy told me about what she found because I'm descendants of Saskatchewan farmers and Ontario farmers, some dairy, some wheat, and I've never heard of this problem. And I'm assuming that it's the same whether you're in Canada or the United States, but how did you discover this? Can you just give us a bit of background?
Yeah, so one of my best friends is a chicken farmer. And she was just having a really hard time with her mental health. So it wasn't even something that I learned about in school. It wasn't something that I read about on like a suicide prevention post. It was literally just I went into a deep dive because I noticed that one of my best friends was struggling and I was like there has to be other people like
Yeah.
because a lot of her struggles were work related. It wasn't like there was like she's happily married, her husband is wonderful, like everything was good except for work. And that was causing her a lot of distress.
And how was that exhibiting? Like, was it depression or anxiety or
A
wanting to
mixture of
just,
both.
oh yeah, or just leave the farm entirely, kind of radical life decisions?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, she at one point did have a plan to end her life, and
Oh.
thankfully that was not the journey that she went down, but that was something that she felt like would make things better, because then her family wouldn't have to worry about the debt, worry about like the work expectations, worry about all of those things, and she could just like her family could just move on, and she thought that it was better for them if she did that. And so thankfully I'm glad she did it, and now she's in a better place, and actually she is ending up now selling her chicken houses so that she can move on to other things. But because that lifestyle was so stressful for her.
It's really sad to hear. So talk to us a little bit more. What did you find in your deep dive? Like, it sounds as though it's a very prominent issue that's may or may not have been swept under the rug, or just like most of the stuff we talk about on the show is just there's not enough information around it to like get the red flags up. So what did you find when you kind of dug into this?
Yeah, so for my research for education that I've been through, continuing education courses, a lot of times I hear about suicide risk being higher for minorities, for the LGBTQ plus community, for like just all of these main groups of people, but a lot of times I didn't hear a lot about occupation. So this one study that I found looked at a range of occupations, and it found that the farmers were like the fourth leading occupation to die by suicide.
Wow.
And then, yes, and then all of the ones above that were what we would still consider like blue collar workers, like construction, different forms of construction, maybe like management for construction companies, like and I would say like the top six, I think were all like what we can classify as blue collar workers. And I had never even realized that those numbers were that high.
Do you know why? Like, is
A
there
lot of it has
a
a lot
common,
of it has
like,
to
is there
do
a
with them.
common thread that's kind of weaving this all together?
A lot of it has to do with like additional stressors that they face. So with the unpredictability of their jobs, obviously like construction, you're going to have weather that impacts your work, which then impacts your finances. Same thing with farmers. Like there are so many things that are outside of their control in their profession that ends up really causing so much more additional stress that oftentimes we don't even realize or pay attention to. I think when you look at like healthcare professionals like myself or doctors, we go through training to try and prevent a lot of these things from impacting our day-to-day life, where these people don't. Most of these people, especially farmers, have been in this for generations, and now like they're not getting any training on how to deal with the emotions of everything. They're just getting training on how to continue the farm life and continue the family like legacy.
You know what I find really interesting as a parallel? I work in a completely different industry in senior care, but I can tell you that there is a very high stress level connected to the fact that no matter how well you do as a business, a person, regardless if you're overperforming at any minute, weather, what happens in my scenarios, all that stuff that has nothing to do with actually what your performance is could just like vanish your whole job. And you're left wondering all the time, like, I don't understand this. I am literally doing the best job possible, like top in the field, doing all the stuff. The farmers
Mm-hmm.
are doing the best job. There's an assortment of farmers, right? They're getting the crops there, they're doing all the stuff. The construction workers are doing all the stuff. They're performing, they're really good at their job. And then for nothing, like nothing in their control. It's like, sorry, you're SOL. And it's like, I understand that stress at a very visceral level because I deal with it. And it's just like, it's really difficult to talk about because we were taught, I was taught, like as a society that if you perform well, like you think you go, things go well, you do well in life, right? And
Right.
that's just not what I'm finding. Is that like a similar kind of thing that you've come into contact with? Like you said, with the weather and stuff, they just have no control.
Right. Also, like just the amount of financial debt that they have to go into to be able to continue day-to-day life in those
Mhm.
slow periods, or maybe if there's a drought, like, and they're not able to harvest a full crop, then like they are out of luck. Like they don't have any backup things to help keep them in place. And so you're seeing that constant worry too of just like, when are things going to crumble? Like when is the next shoe going to drop? When is it just going to be over? And for some people it's really conflicting because it's like, okay, if it was over it would provide me a lot of peace, but also if it was over that would mean I failed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, if you in the waiting room heard that my closest family member, she's well beyond farming her own land, but she has a lot of land just south of Cleveland. And so for her, she watches the sharecropping with interest from her kitchen table, but it's someone else who is
Mm-hmm.
running her land. And I know over the years, because she loves to talk about what's happening on the property, is that some years the soybeans just don't thrive. And now, luckily, she's not dependent on that. But what you're talking about, this uncertainty, it's sort of fascinating for me because when we talk to young people who are dealing with mental health challenges, I'm wondering if uncertainty is the human thing. Like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go to university? Am I going to get an A in math? We're seeing a crisis in our young people, but uncertainty seems to be a common thread that I think that you and Amy have kind of solved. You've solved this for humanity. Thank you very much.
But
But
then what's the next step,
well,
right?
that's just it. And
Yeah.
then what do you do with that? What do your clients tell you helps them with living with uncertainty?
I think it one of the most helpful things is just realizing that you're human if you have uncertainty. Like
Mhm.
just being stuck in the humanity of it. Like if you didn't have uncertainty and you didn't have like concern, that would mean one, you don't care, which would be a bigger concern for me in of itself than your anxiety. Like if you were just shut off and didn't care at all. But then also just having a support system, having people who understand, who know, having that unbiased person like a therapist who they can go to and talk to, because a lot of times people don't have those outlets, and that's one of the things that add like additional stress to the farming community because they are so isolated, because they have to have large plots of land to be able to do their work. So there may be, you know, a lot of space between them and the other person. And then also their work schedules don't allow for a lot of social time.
Mm.
And what about the family part? Because I know in my situation, all the people doing the farming were part of the same family. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and uh not all of us want to hang around with our family members all day long, you know? But
Yeah.
also when you're talking about generational stuff, maybe there's stress because in my family's case, the people currently running the farms are expected to take care of the seniors
Mm-hmm.
on the farm.
Yeah.
And which, speaks to what Amy does for a living is, there's not an option to go to a long-term care facility or a senior's home. So how does the family dynamic play into this?
I think it also feels more like a smaller community within the bigger community. So the family itself begins to feel like a smaller community where you're all just taking care of each other and meeting each other's needs. But that, like you mentioned, does provide a lot of additional stress for the younger people in the family. But also, like you said, there's family conflict. Like, nobody wants to nobody can be with somebody 24 hours a day and not have any conflict. So if you're only working, which I think has become really rare in at least America from what I've seen, is that if you're only working on the farm and your family is only working on the farm, you're only going to see your family. Now, what we see happening more now is farmers are having to take on additional jobs, or their partners are having to work outside of the home to be able to make ends meet or to have insurance. So I think that does like add in another level of stress too to some as well, is trying to find health insurance um if you don't have that available to you.
Gosh, now I have a new respect for farmers after everything that you're revealing, because I had never thought of those particular stresses. How do people do once they have some counseling? Are they, because I don't know about the farmers you meet, but my farmers were stoic people that didn't like to talk about their feelings, like the older ones, coming over from Ireland and the potato famine, and we just
Mm-hmm.
persevered. And, so talking about their feelings doesn't come kind of naturally to them.
That's what I was going
No.
to add to
Yeah.
it as well. Like I have a farming background as well in our family, and what I've seen growing up is our farmers don't talk. And so even like getting this, like maybe you should go see someone, maybe there's a peer support group, maybe anything. I feel like farming as in machinery and distribution and all that stuff has come a long way, but then no one's taking care of the seeds. No one's taking care of the farmers who actually have to execute all of it for all of us. Like, how is that for like just weighing on? Like, so what do we do with these stoic and very, I was gonna say difficult, but it's not difficult. It's like it's a pass through. It's like that's what you learn. And farming is such a, um, it's such a career that's been here for so long. Like it's probably one of the first, right? And so it's like it's just been passed in like pressure, 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 pressure. How do we convince them to talk to someone?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing starts with education. So just helping them to understand, that therapists are not here to like dismiss them, to make them feel any less, to make them feel any worse, or even to make things more stressful. Like that's one of the things that I always try to work with on my clients is like, what is good for you? Like, let me be flexible with you. Like, when is a good time? Like, do you need telehealth? And I currently only offer telehealth services, but if you want in person, like, let's get an in person who can meet with you and talk with you. Um, but I think building that rapport takes so long that in the beginning they're not talking about their feelings, but over time it can become to where they do feel more comfortable to do that. I think also as people who have farmers in their life, one of the best things that you can do is start normalizing and having the communication of like, hey, this is how I feel. Like, and not even asking them to share with in the beginning how they feel, but just being open to share how you feel to help them see that it is normalized communication. Small talk doesn't have to be how's the weather. We can talk about other things. And so I think that's one of the big things as individuals we can do is just try to normalize communication about emotions and feelings
Yeah.
on a deeper level. Um, Also, like, if you're listening to this, you can tell a farmer, like, hey, I heard this podcast episode. Like, I want to know your thoughts on it. Like, what do you think? Um, One of the things that I saw with my friend was she made a post and on Facebook about and shared an article about a farmer who had been trying to do like a peer support group. And there were so many comments who were just like, yes, this was so needed, like blah blah, like all of these comments just engaging of farmers who were actually speaking out and saying like, yes, this is needed. And so if the conversation is started, then that's the place to start. Like we have to start the conversation, and even though they may not be the ones to start it themselves, and you may have to start the conversation a couple of times, obviously not in an annoying way, but in a, you know, place of love and care, starting the conversation and just sharing like, hey, this is what I learned. Like, is this something that you're struggling with? Because like I had no idea that running a farm was like running a huge business, which it's laughable almost to say that out loud, but we don't think about it that way. Like we don't think about a farm as like a big business, but they're dealing with lots of money. They're dealing with lots of equipment, lots of land, all of these things. Whereas if this was a business like a hotel agency, there would be accountants and project developers and all of these people doing all of these things for this hotel company that had all of this land dealing with all of this money. But when it comes to farmers, it's just the family and maybe only one or two people.
Yeah.
They might
And
not, they might not even have training for it, right? To your point earlier, they might not even have any
No.
sort of training for handling accounts or whatever, and they've just figured it out and pieced it together, but that in itself is stressful.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, because my dad's cousin, who is my dad's age, let me drive the combine one summer, and my dad told me later that that combine cost more than our house. And, I'm glad I didn't know that at the time, or I might have driven it into a ditch. But the financial investment, when you're not sure if the crops are going to survive, I can get that 100% kind of get that financial stress as well. So there's a lot of barriers in the community to ask for help. And as I'm sure you know, our medical system and your medical system in the United States are vastly different. But
Mm-hmm.
even with what we call socialized medicine, it is extremely difficult to get a mental health provider if you don't have any money, like
Mm-hmm.
extremely difficult. And or a government program. And so does that keep people from seeking help? Because if they're already in financial stress, then they're going to put on the back burner their mental health.
For sure. Um, Also, that's not considered a need a lot of the time. A lot of the time, the need is considered, food, water for the family, not even sometimes like food and water for themselves goes on the back burner too. So, food, water, clothes, shelter for their family, food, water, shelter for the animals or for like the farm, handling farm stuff. So, I mean, farmers are already putting their physical health on the back burner to begin with.
Right.
So,
Right.
then you add in mental health, which the majority of people already put on the back burner. Now, like farmers is like even further down on the priority list than um like the average person. So as far as financial responsibility, if they don't have insurance, the for us in the US, like if you have insurance, your therapy is typically like maybe $50 or less, the copay. And then if you've met your deductible, like a lot of complicated things that go into it, but sometimes $50 or less. But if you don't have insurance, you're looking at like $150 to $200 a session. And then if you're going through a lot, you probably need to be seen every week. Most, I don't have that kind of extra money. Most people don't have that kind of extra money. So it really is difficult for them to be able to prioritize their mental health over something that is considered a higher need.
Yeah, and I certainly the stoic farmers that I have been related to in my lifetime, they're going to put everybody else before themselves, right? And I'm sure that's what your friend was doing,
Mm-hmm.
is just delaying and delaying because she was putting her needs on the back burner.
Yeah, for sure. Also, the unique thing about this research is I really couldn't find much research about women. And so
Yeah.
the in the research that I did, the article was divided between males and females, and the males was only the only one that considered farmers. There weren't enough females that considered their occupation as farmers to do the
Yeah.
study. So, but we all know, like, if you're in a family unit and husband and wife family unit, if they, if the husband is the farmer, the woman is the farmer too. Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
nothing like, but if you go into a family and both of the people, both of the adults are basically farmers, even if they have additional jobs. So there's a lot of under research for especially females in that area too.
Isn't that just our life? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Like,
I'm telling
yes,
you,
just another way we're under researched.
I could go down a whole rabbit hole on that one. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I just find that it's so interesting, and I'm wondering if, like, traditionally, I hear what you're saying because you're right. They're farmers, they're farmers, they're farmers. Traditionally, I feel like the farmer, to your point, was the male and coming down
Mm-hmm.
the line, right? And so I wonder if, like, us going forward, I guess, with more interest in mental health, more conversations around mental health, more women in the farming roles that are claiming it as their occupation, I'm hoping there'll be some sort of twitch of change. It happens small, but usually, I can't say 100%, but I find that women are more easily able to talk about things. Not all of them, but more easily able to talk about things. And in my work, I deal with seniors, and the conversation from what we were talking about before, like the conversations are always really closed regardless, because there's definitely seniors that will have a conversation, but most people don't want to talk about anything. They don't want to talk about next steps. They don't want to talk about mental health. They don't want to talk about their physical health or anything. And so I feel like in this demographic of people, it's like really combined, like it's really adding up in a different way, because you've got this like occupation where it never even really was a thing to talk about it. Whereas, like in other ones, you'd have colleagues not in your family, you'd have different things to talk about, but you're like in this family grouping. And so I think that for the people that are seniors now that are, ending their service on the farm that's being passed down, I think that's a very challenging group to change the ideals behind. One of our guests, when you're talking about normalizing it, one of our guests previously said destigmatization, destigmatization, not normalization. Sorry, I couldn't get it out. Which I thought was really interesting in this case too, because we don't want to normalize a conversation on mental health, is what she was saying. Because we don't want it to vanish. We don't want to be like everybody has these problems. We want to
Right.
destigmatize it so that we can talk about it where it needs to be talked about, which is everywhere. But like farmers dealing with this, like let's not normalize this because then nobody does anything about it, which I found was a
Mm-hmm.
really interesting point she was talking about too, which I feel applies really well here.
Yeah, for sure. I think if people aren't talking about it, that's also a big issue. But if we're talking about it to the point that, people are just overlooking it and almost like, well, everyone has these problems, then you're minimizing the situation.
Yeah.
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 I think a lot of people feel like, you know, safety in their jobs and things like that. And what I have learned in my world is that, nobody's job is safe, but there's different occupations that are handling it differently. And the normalized thing is like nobody really like if you work for someone, it's safer than being an entrepreneur like we are, right? And it's like,
Right.
I don't feel like that. I feel like I have way more control over someone just randomly deciding on what to do with me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so really just getting that conversation around, you know, making sure that we're taking into account that everybody's what am I trying to say, Kim? Everybody's occupation is so different that we really need to like look more granularly at each and know that like there's different problems, for
Yeah.
instance, that the farmers are facing that someone in an office job has no idea about, for instance. That's where I was
Oh,
going, right,
yeah.
Kim? I was
Yeah.
trying to
Or
connect.
no, but the point you're making, Amy,
Thank you.
brilliant, because a soldier has a different set of needs than a paramedic or a firefighter and an accountant at end of year taxes with all of the clients wanting the same thing in the same week. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And because Amy, you brought up sort of the seniors, I'm interested, Kesley, in what's it like to be a young person on a farm these days? Because what if they don't want to be a farmer, or and the cousins that I had, second and third, or I don't know how we were related,
Mm-hmm.
they had these very small high schools, and then they would have dances in the next community over. But now the internet has been invented since I was a kid, and that's going to show them a whole world that maybe kind of conflicts with what their parents want for them. So what are you saying about the younger farmers in the making? Or I mean, they're almost already farmers, right? Because what kid on a farm doesn't have chores? So
Right.
yeah, so what?
Also, Kim, did you grow up in Footloose or
Eh, bah,
the community over is where you guys go when they party? It's true though.
Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Would have been a lot better if I was in that. Well, we didn't have the religious restrictions to dancing that Footloose had, but yeah, being a young person in a remote area, and this was an
Mm-hmm.
hour away from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. What is the mental health like for those kids? Because they get to see a whole world in the internet that generations before didn't, you know?
It can help and it can hurt. Like that's where it can help bring education, but it can also bring some
Turmoil.
pain, some confusion. Like your parents are telling you one thing, you're seeing another online. Um it can The kids now growing up on farms are really trying, I think, to bring more awareness. I think the kids we have now coming up in this generation are very much more in tune with their emotions. Um, and they've learned a lot of that from social media. And so they're then trying to have these conversations with their parents. And so that does present some conflict, but also it's you know, do I want to be a farmer? Because I see all of these things happening. Like I see the struggles that they're presenting. And my friend is actually, her dad has still to this day has chicken houses, is a chicken farmer. And um she knew he made it work, so, and had a good life for her family, so that's what she wanted to do. Like that's what she wanted. um and when she got into it, she was a single woman, and she like did not have the back support of a spouse. And so it really was for her the not even the pressure, but the pride of just also being a farmer, and wanting to continue that legacy. So I think that's going to be conflicting for our young people on a different level now, even than it was before, because before you didn't have social media. You couldn't see all of the things that everybody else was doing, where now you're basically going to be aware that the whole world is living life differently, and you're like either going to choose to keep living in a rural community as a farmer, or you're going to choose to leave your family. And so that's also like the sense of family pride that comes in.
Those are some tough choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
On top of which, too, you've got our friend Guilt that hangs out for a while as well, right? And so
Yeah.
what I always say, dance with guilt, right? Right? Like whether you do or whether you don't, you're still gonna have to deal with it. Whether you stay, there's guilt. Whether you go, there's guilt. It's just a whole mental health component that all of us deal with. We just all deal with it a bit different. And but like we know how much it weighs on people, right? And it's like just so like the obligation of family and the obligation to do whatever, right? So um yeah, I feel like they've got a bit of a double-edged sword. There's a lot going on for these farmers, really. Thank you for kind of enlightening us for this because again, we both grew up in farming type communities and in lineage, and it's just not something even for us who are wide awake to mental health. It's not
Yeah.
something that I've even put together before. Um, and it just must be so challenging. It sounds so challenging.
Yeah. It wasn't, I mean, I have lots of generations of farmers before me and lots of family friends that are farmers, and I had no idea. I think it also brings a sense of fear sometimes with that accessibility. So the accessibility of information.
Hmm.
Because that was my concern. I was like, I know so many farmers, like how, like if this is the odds, what is going to happen?
Hmm.
Um so I think that that is something that people also have to work through, is like, okay, yes, you educate yourself, but then how do you process that information? Because that's heavy. Like that's really heavy information. Um, and also just because your stress is different than somebody else's doesn't undermine your stress.
No, it's all valid. I've
Right.
I've been wondering this whole conversation on a funner side note, but related, absolutely. I wonder, and I'm gonna look for it now, if there are any influencers, if there are any farmer influencers in social media because there's influencers for friggin' everything.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm curious to know, which I'll do a deep dive after we chat just for interest purposes, but that like to get education out, to get people to understand that it's happening, we need like thought leadership. We need people to start talking about it and like becoming that influencer. And I mean, I was watching a show with my daughter the other day, and one of the teams was a group of 24-year-olds who were all influencers, and they had like 25 million followers. And it's like, if 24-year-olds
Wow.
can do this, I got to figure this out. And so I
Yeah.
feel like if there was room for, well, there's always room for, but if they start talking about it even in that realm to get
Mm-hmm.
that information out, because I do feel like from my own work, although it's a little bit sad to say, but I do feel like not like the older farmers are a lost cause. I don't want it to come off like that, but I do feel like it's going to be much more difficult to change that perception. But that is being handed down generation to generation, and our newer generations that are taking it on are much more open, they're much more aware. And so that's where the power lies in trying to change this situation so that, people do support groups. People do go and talk to, maybe there's a group insurance that the farmers go into. I don't know anything about this community, but like it seems like I could problem solve the crap out of this and like be like, hey, what about this? What about that? Because I just feel like there's so much room to go up. Really, like there's
Yeah.
so much room for new ideas in a very old occupation.
Yeah. And I think that's initially why I started trying to get some podcast guest opportunities for this topic, was just trying to get the word out. Like, because I know I don't have the following, but if I can talk to people who have the following and explain to them, like, the rate of farmers that took their own life in 2020 was more than the rate of COVID deaths in 2020. Like,
Oh,
if you realize that, like, that's big.
that's
Like,
huge.
that's a
Yeah.
big number. And that's just farmers. Like, that's not even considering everyone else. So that's an even bigger picture, right? Is like just the overall rate as well. And so that was one of the biggest things that led me to try to get this information out, because I was like, I need to talk to people, because even if a younger generational farmer hears it, they can eventually like try to start talking to their older family members about these things. And it may not change everybody, and I don't think that one podcast or 5 podcast episodes is going to change everyone, because there's such a big population. But if just some people can be aware, I think that's better than none.
I congratulate you. That's a shocking statistic. And to be a voice for this, Kesley, I think is amazing, because the one thing that we know about change is that it takes a few brave people to start it, right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I hope that you share with your friend how she inspired you as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I of course like got her permission to share her story, and she's always been very adamant that I can share. Um because I told her, I was like, I will help you in no matter what way I can. And I realized that a lot of that way was by also making other people aware, um, because you don't realize that somebody is struggling until you talk to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all
It,
good at hiding
it,
it.
it has to
Mm-hmm.
be so difficult when you're born into a farming family. I wasn't, because my dad went away to military college, so kind of the branches broke
Mm-hmm.
off. But when you're born into a family and you're just so afraid of disappointing your parents, because you just don't want to do it. And
Yeah.
maybe you want to be a painter in Paris, or you want to, join the military or something else. And that it's heartbreaking to think of young people who are looking around the farm at the end of the day when they come home from school and think they're just expected to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll probably get a house on the acre over, or which is what happened to a lot of my distant family members, is they just give you a piece of land and you put your house on that, and then you go and find a spouse, and then they work on your land because they worked on their parents' land. And to not have choice. um
Yeah.
it's subtle. It's not like someone's threatening them to stay, but it's that subtle, you're expected to maintain the family tradition.
Right.
That's tough stuff. It's tough stuff.
Mhm.
For sure. And we also find that a lot of times, it falls on the males. And so, as we mentioned earlier, like that male figure in the home is typically the one that is taking over. And so I do want to like recognize that, as it being Men's Mental Health Month, is like, you have to start somewhere and speaking out and sharing and how you're feeling, so that people can help you, because you're not alone. Like, and even, you know, the young men who are carrying that weight of trying to take on a family generation with little to no help, that has to be such a big weight. And like,
Yeah.
they're not alone. Like, they don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
thank you.
thanks for sharing and coming on, and we'll do our part to get this out. get it around. You're in the States, but is there somewhere that our viewers, we have viewers all over the place, but our
Hmm.
viewers can find you? Where would they find
Yeah.
you?
So my website is Denney-Counselling. So it's DENNEY-counseling.com. And that's one of the best places to find me. There's a contact form on there. And then I'm also on Instagram at Denney Counselling as well.
Perfect. Okay,
Okay.
great. Well, thank
When
you
we
again.
when we put out this episode, we're gonna tag you all over the place.
Yeah.
Cool. I am grateful for it.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much. And for our viewers that are listening, I hope you have been able to gain some knowledge in there. I feel like we have another t-shirt coming, Kimothy. Hug a farmer is where I'm
Like a
thinking.
farmer.
Hug a farmer.
I love it.
Thanks so much. I mean, we really do appreciate having you on there and on here. And for people that are on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and notify so that you can get our next episodes. And we are also on any podcast forum or platform that you have. So until next time on the Inner Shift, we'll see you then.
Thanks, Kesley.
Thanks.
Bye.